does kind of make you scratch your head. Why are they unemployed, right? They were the ones who were willing to raise their right hand, take that risk, make that sacrifice on behalf of everybody else, right?
And it's like, oh, you're a veteran, you need special care. It's like, no, you just need opportunity.
Each financial decision is not in a silo by itself. It has to be looked at how it relates to something else in your plan. And most people are not looking at the big picture.
So this is John Smallwood, and I am back on Money Isn't podcast. And as you know, the podcast is really been designed to provide as much information in areas to help people with their wealth management, with their financial decisions, with complex ideas, and trying to make them simple, okay? And one of the most important things that I think about when we're dealing with long-term wealth decisions is getting people to be optimal in their jobs, being optimal in what they do, in their savings rate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the purpose of the podcast. I really appreciate all the subscriptions. At the time that we're recording this, we're about 30 views, 30 subscribers short of 10,000. And I can't do it without everybody that's here and benefiting from this. So I want to say thank you. Today, I have a very special guest, and his name is Bernie Hyland. And Bernie Hyland is a veteran. Welcome, Bernie.
Thank you, John. It's great to be here.
It's really great to be here and have you. Now, when you look at his background, right, he served for over 30 years in the Army at numerous areas. I mean, I'm sure you started as a private, right? And you worked yourself all the way up to a colonel.
Well, and started as a second lieutenant, which is the enlisted soldiers would say, yeah, you're a private.
Yeah, don't fool yourself, right?
Exactly.
So I think today we're going to be diving into something that I think is really, really important is the veteran community. And without you and without your 16 million veterans that we have right now that are here, we don't have what we have in this United States, right? The veterans protect our freedom, our rights, our ability to do what we do, to get on a podcast and share these things, right? Bernie's experience, he's a survivor of the Pentagon 9/11 attack. He worked in the defense community for over 30 years. And now he's out in the private sector and he's doing something truly amazing. He's working for a company called ERS, Educational Resource Systems, and their Elite program, which is really designed to help veterans get quality jobs and solving a problem for companies who are looking for skilled, reliable workforce. Welcome, Bernie.
Thanks very much, John. It's an honor really to be part of the show here and perhaps help people understand not just what ERS is doing, but more about the value of what veterans can bring to the workplace, because so many people out there really don't understand them. They think they do, especially employers. But in the end, that's kind of what our mission is at ERS Elite. We are in the business of helping employers connect with some awesome talent, men and women who have not only been patriotic, stood up and did the right thing, raised the right hand, took an oath, served our country, but more importantly, have been tested under the most extreme conditions, job performance-wise, and what we're doing is trying to help them connect with employers who want people who are mission-focused, values-focused, not afraid of a challenge, and and absolutely become fantastic members of their team.
Smallwood Wealth Management is the lead sponsor of this podcast. You have an opportunity to have a free, no obligation conversation with one of our qualified advisors. Go to smallwoodwealth.com, schedule a call, or call us at 800-797-1000 and get on our calendars.
So it is an honor to be a part of the podcast this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you. And I want to, before we jump into what you're doing and how it helps a specific niche out there, I want to kind of talk about the statistics, right? The veteran landscape, from what I understand, right now you have about almost 17 million people who are veterans of the armed services. About 50% of them are over 65 at this point. And but the employment rate of veterans, or the unemployment rate, is significantly higher than that of the normal population. And that's something that concerns me always, right? Is why are they more unemployed than the rest of the population? Because they're some of the most skilled people. And I think there's a couple reasons for that, but it's this thing that you're doing was born out of the fact that, hey, we've got a problem and companies have a problem finding quality people. So explain more, like, how did this get to this point?
Well, it is a vexing scenario when you stop and think about that many people, that many citizens of our country who in many cases are not only unemployed, but have gone kind of above and beyond what their average peers are doing out there. And they were the ones who were willing to raise their right hand and take that risk, make that sacrifice on behalf of everybody else, right? So it does kind of make you scratch your head. Why are they unemployed, right?
Yeah, tremendous risk. I mean, to raise your hand and say, I'm going to go do that is unbelievable, because I didn't do it. And I have so much respect and gratitude for those that have, because I know without that, I don't get to sit in this chair.
So it's an interesting paradigm, right? We live today in a nation that has an all-volunteer force. So everybody who raises that right hand is actually doing it at will, right? They are stepping up and saying, I actually want to go do this, as opposed to the Vietnam era, which is the last time when we had a conscription army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and in some cases we get around about it. We say people were dragged into the military service at gunpoint, right?
Yeah.
So when you look at those numbers, at how many million veterans are out there, right, of all flavors, and they actually still go back there. Believe it or not, there still are some World War II era veterans alive in this country, as is the case with Korean War and Vietnam era veterans. The target population, especially the population we work with, is about 3.8 million out of the 16 or so million total veteran population. And that 3.8 million, John, are the what we call the post 9/11 era veterans, right? So these would be the young men and women who would be eligible for the post 9/11 GI Bill. And
30 years old to 40 years old, basically?
Pretty much, right? So the youngest ones that we work with, I'm going to say maybe 24, 25 years old. They've done one enlistment and gotten out, 3 years on active duty or so, and decided maybe it wasn't for them, and they decided to get out. But there's also first Gulf War era veterans that are eligible for the programs that we support. Some of them are great people. Now they're naturally going to be on the upper end of the age range, right? But some of those folks are people who have, believe it or not, say guys like me, right, who've done a full career, either in the military or bridged over and got into the private sector, and now they're working on a second career or maybe even a third career. So in aggregate, that total population, it's around 5 million, about around 5 million people who are really, I'll say, in that sweet spot for good talent to be in the workforce, right? as opposed to people who are really approaching retirement age.
So it's a big population. Of that 5 million people, do you know how many people are actually, employed versus not, or underemployed? Is there any statistic on that?
So the underemployed statistic is usually the way they it's usually the way they kind of track it. I mean, yes, there's the unemployed piece, which is fairly high. The underemployed is the piece that we really want to take a hard look at, because underemployed usually it's focused on people who are working, but really not working at their full potential, right? And so that's a population that I am the most interested in. The unemployed population also is a piece of what we go after too, because the unemployed people oftentimes are military personnel who've gone through the transition process or just separated and by nature of the beast haven't found a job yet. They've gotten out. It doesn't mean they're not good people to hire, good people to employ. They just haven't connected yet. So so the total population, if you want to think about it in terms of underemployed and unemployed, it's probably between 30 to 40% of that total veteran population, right?
Oh, wow.
Because in addition to that, you have to start, you got to kind of start at the top of that filter too, right? So generally speaking, statistically speaking, about 80% of the veterans who separate from military service are what we call honorably discharged. So these are people who came off active duty, having done their job well, and are simply separating from the service for whatever reason. And that reason could be that they just discovered it wasn't for them. It could be that they completed a full career, went all the way up to 20 years of service and decided to retire. It could be that they were injured while on active duty and got a medical discharge, or they simply decided one day, this was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, but I'm not sure this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, right? So that 80% population, honorably discharged, more or less says that we would be more than happy to let you come back and serve again in the armed forces, provided you could meet the eligibility requirements in terms of suitability for service.
Right.
Now, the other 20% are people with what we call bad paper. So that's dishonorably discharged, which is a very, very tiny population, or discharged with a general under honorable conditions discharge, which oftentimes, unfortunately, it's associated with service members they've had behavioral problems while they were in the military. Like so many other young people make the mistake of going out and having a good time one too many times at night with their buddies, and may have gotten a DUI or a drug charge. Who knows? Unfortunately, that population is always going to struggle to find employment on the back end of their service. But that other 80% that were honorably discharged, many of them are in the sweet spot. They're good, experienced, skilled workers that, and I'm talking about workers too, because we focus at ERS so much on technical skilled people that are more or less hourly workers. But there's a lot of officers and senior enlisted people that come out that are part of that 80% population that are extraordinary leaders. And I'm working right now, ironically, with two companies. I can't share their name because we're in contract negotiations, but
Yeah, right.
I'm working with two companies right now that are looking for leaders. And they're not interested in just hourly workers. They want people who are going to lead those hourly workers in their manufacturer setting, and they are smart enough to know that when you take, for example, maybe some Navy commander who commanded a destroyer, or some Army lieutenant colonel who commanded a tank or infantry battalion and had, you know, 1,000 soldiers working under them, or sailors. Those people have real leadership skills. You know, they've had to manage people, money, resources, budgets, equipment, mission. They've had to do it all, right? Just like any other corporate executive.
And that's interesting because, like, I want to go back in time for a second and kind of think about, you put in 30 years with the Army and you retired. When you retired, like, were you done, or were you considering, like, okay, now I've got my pension, I've got, I put in my 30 years, am I going to now go work for something else? Talk about that moment when you decided to retire, and like what your vision was, and then how the vision actually changed.
So my case was a little different than, I'll say, the average, right? So that first, let's talk about the average person that's getting out. Now I'll talk about my own case.
Yeah.
So let's say, and I'm going to use, if you don't mind, the technician, the automotive service technicians that are in our program, because they're a great example. So their average, you asked about the age a few minutes ago. Their average age ranges from about 25 to 35 for automotive service technicians. So these are mostly service members who were tank automotive mechanics in the Army or the Marine Corps, aviation technicians for the Navy and the Air Force. Believe it or not, we've actually had a couple of Navy nuclear propulsion technicians cross over to become automotive techs. And so in their case, most of those folks are coming out without a job. There's no job waiting for them. They're true job searchers, right? Unlike folks in my situation who were careerists. In my case, I was on the Secretary of Defense's staff in the Pentagon when I separated from service. And I had previously worked on base closure. So there was actually a company who had the contract to support base closure implementation for the Department of the Army. They knew who I was, and they actually came looking for me. So they offered me a job. I actually was one of the fortunate few that had a job waiting for me. All I had to do was decide to drop my paper and say, you know what, I've had a great run with this. It's time to go, right?
Cool.
So, that happens every day, by the way, to people in the Pentagon.
I would think, because your connections, your knowledge, your inside, like, we're real close to Fort Monmouth, which was one of those base closures that's been going on for 20 years.
Right. And so that's that's kind of a classic example of, if you have a good network of connectivity, things happen, right? Yeah. So I like to tell people, young people in particular, even my daughter, it's not who you know, it's who knows you, right? Who you've built a reputation with, and those people would like to have you come work for them. Now, that doesn't only, by the way, John, happen to officers and senior enlisted people. Here's a classic example where the job's often waiting for you, right? Today, if you go watch the news, if you go on the news tonight, or even go on YouTube tonight, you'll find all kinds of videos about the drone war over in Ukraine and Russia, right? So all these drone operators that are out there, all these young kids that have all this high tech, knowledge and skill and capability working with drones, they're in that same mode, right? So there are companies who are designing the next generation of drones and building the ones they're using today. They can't wait to get their hands on young kids who are drone operators. It's sort of the way it was with IT techs in the military about 10, 15 years ago, before the world was saturated with IT people. There was a very strong, high density group of bright, I'll use the word brilliant, IT people in the military. And starting back in the 90s, they were, I would say the services were struggling to hang on to those people because the private sector was baiting them away with big money to try to recruit them into the private sector. So you do have kind of, I'll say you got three cohorts. You got the ones who were lucky people like me that had a job waiting for them. You have those in the middle who are super skilled and are ideally suited to find a great job in the private sector, but haven't quite connected yet. And then you have hard skilled, technical skilled people on the opposite end who are also in very high demand in the private sector, and they're looking for them to come out every day. And those, by the way, are the companies that advertise in the base newspapers, Lockheed Martin and General Dynamics, all the big defense companies that are out there that are always looking for fabulous talent. They're the people that are at every career fair on the military base. They are well represented. Even believe it or not, government entities like U.S. Border Patrol and organizations like that are trying to find people who are willing to work in tough areas of the country. They're scooping up service members that are getting out as fast as they can get their hands on them, right? But they search in different ways. They connect through different venues.
Mm. So I think what's interesting is I kind of want to let's jump now backwards again, but now you're here, you're at, you're doing this elite program. You have a specialty niche, and it's that Kia VTAP thing, right? And that is, let's talk about how that happened and how you're really helping people go forward here. I mean, I'm on the website to show it, but tell me how this was, how did this get created? How does it work? How does it help the company? How does it help the veteran, etc.?
So Kia's Veteran Technician Apprenticeship Program is the product of evolution. I'll start with that. You asked about, how did I transition out? So let's just step back in time to 2010 first, right? Mm. So in February of 2010, I was contacted by Caliber Systems in Alexandria, Virginia, who was my first private sector employer, and so I went to work at Caliber on a project over back at the Pentagon, working in the Assistant Secretary of the Army's office for Installations, Energy, and Environment, helping out with the base realignment and closure implementation project, and also working on Army energy metrics and things like that. I think it was in 2011, 2012, Caliber started doing work with the Department of Veterans Affairs, VA, over in Washington, D.C., in the Undersecretary for Veterans Benefits. And I was asked to go over there and support one of the deputy undersecretaries to help them conduct an analysis on lessons learned and best practices associated with employing veterans. And that was driven by some concerns across the government at DOD, at the Department of Labor and VA, driven by, at that time, some initiatives inside the White House through the Obama administration, where they were concerned about the high level of veteran unemployment. And you have to remember now, this is at the peak of the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, right? Yeah, so why was the high veteran unemployment an issue? It was problematic because those service members that were separating, coming off active duty, leaving the military, were not finding jobs, and all those people were going on unemployment benefits, right? Interesting. So their enlistments had run out. They're now outside the gate on the other side of the fence with no job, collecting unemployment, and that bill was massive. I mean, we're talking about money that's up in the billions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
And of course, that becomes a hot potato. Who's eating that bill? Is that bill being absorbed by Department of Labor, the Department of Defense, and everybody starts pointing in different directions? DOD's eating the bill, and they're saying you're killing the defense budget. Department of Labor, go solve this problem, right? Um, actually, I got that wrong. They pointed initially to VA, right? Because they said they're veterans now, they're your problem, right? And of course, VA went down the path of trying to solve that problem, and then the Department of Labor got involved and said, whoa, 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 whoa. Employment is us. That's us. VA, you're taking care of health care and
Disability benefits
bill and all, housing and all that. But employment is us, Department of Labor. So there was some arm wrestling that went around inside the government for a couple of years, 3 years. And finally the dust settled. And, and VA kind of got out of the business of veterans employment, although their finger is still in that pie, very deeply in that pie. But Department of Labor really owns that responsibility. So that's kind of where it settled out. And along the way, there were some good things that happened. There were two members of Congress, one from the Democrat side, one from the Republican side, that came together to help address some legislative issues with apprenticeship, national apprenticeship. And they really broke down a huge barrier, which was there were corporations out there that wanted to employ veterans, big companies, really massive corporations. And they wanted to establish apprenticeship programs that were national, not just state-based. And prior to this time, all you could do was a state-based apprenticeship, because each individual state has what they call a certifying official. So apprenticeship funds through the GI Bill were broken down by the individual states and territories, versus today, where a corporation can have a national apprenticeship program and not have to deal with 50 individual states that they operate in, right? They just have to deal with one state where their corporate headquarters resides. And that was a big deal. Because it was just discouraging employers from even getting involved in apprenticeship. And that was the project I was working on at VA. At that time, bringing in executives, HR people from the biggest corporations in the country. If there was a name you could think of, they came and visited with the undersecretary and shared with us what was working and what was not working in the private sector to put veterans to work. So as an example, imagine you're, Schneider Trucking Corporation or JB Hunt, one of the big trucking companies, right?
Yeah, one of the national ones. Yeah.
Yep. The Army and the Marine Corps are full of truck drivers, loaded with truck drivers. They couldn't get a job working in the private sector because they did not have a commercial driver's license, a CDL license.
Or they've been driving it for 15 years or 20 years or 5 years. And through conditions that were ridiculous compared to our roads here. Highly skilled,
highly skilled, highly proficient. And by the way, driving amazing pieces of equipment, everything from a 2.5 ton truck up to, 26 wheeled heavy equipment transporters that could drag a 72 ton Abrams tank around on the back of a massive trailer, right? So it was issues like that. Medical people, again, services loaded with doctors, nurses, anesthesiologists. Every medical skill set that you can think of in the private sector resides inside the military healthcare system. And they didn't have the private sector credentials to go out and immediately separate from service and go right to work in a local community-based hospital. Now, many of them successfully did that, but they did it at after a lot of hard roll up your sleeves work, and they'd have to go do their time and get their credential in the private sector. So it was things like that, those kind of lessons that we were cataloging, and we realized that there were some serious obstacles to employment. It wasn't just that people didn't want to hire veterans. There were people that wanted to hire veterans by the thousands, but the veterans had these speed bumps in front of them that they had to overcome.
Which is incredible to me. Like, it's the friction. It's just crazy.
Right, right. So back to your original question, right? So how did we get to this point to Kia VTAP? Well, so along the way, it's kind of funny how weird things happen in life, right? I ordered an Audi Q5 right after I got out of the Army, and I live 54 miles from the Pentagon one way. So I told my wife, I said, "Hey, if I'm going back there in a suit and I'm going to keep making this crazy commute every day, I need to get a new car."
Yeah, and a nice car, something that you're
Right,
gonna
right.
like enjoy
Yeah,
to drive,
something a
etc.
little better than my old Pontiac 6000, right? So
Yeah, just a little. Yeah.
yeah, so I bought this car, and as things turned out, my wife and I wound up invited to a dealer event at the dealership where we purchased the vehicle. We went to this thing, and I met the director of strategy at Audi of America, uh, and an interesting gentleman. He was very high up inside the company, and he's still with the Volkswagen Group at the higher level now, pretty much doing the same thing, helping to create the strategic plan and vision for VW Group products here in the U.S. But he and I shared a little bit of a parallel universe in terms of our careers. Both of us strategic plans and operations kind of people. I speak German pretty decent because I ran the U.S. German foreign exchange program when I was in the Pentagon for a while. So so he and I kind of hit it off, and we developed a friendship. And a couple months later, after he realized what I was working on at VA, one day he called me up and he said, "Could you come out to our headquarters in Herndon, Virginia?" He said, I'm kind of curious if you think there might be a role for veterans in the automotive business." At the time, Audi was going through record growth, like incredible growth, product growth. Their sales were off the charts.
Yeah, right.
And they needed technicians for their dealerships. And so I went out to Herndon with him, and thinking it would, by the way, it was going to be like this, like two guys having a conversation in his office, right?
Yeah.
Oh man, was I wrong? I walked into what we call the L-shaped ambush in the Army. Right? I wind up in their executive conference room with like 25 of their top executives in there, and I thought,
Nice opportunity.
yeah, I thought, holy cow, what's this all about here, right?
Yeah.
And so they asked some fabulous questions, really great questions. They wanted to know if that skill set was portable from, in their mind, they were thinking Humvee mechanics, Army Humvee mechanics and Marine Corps mechanics. And of course, their product was so sophisticated that I was initially a little concerned that a Humvee mechanic might not have the electrical theory and the diagnostic skills that were really needed in these super high-end automobiles. But that being said, I knew in my heart that absolutely, with the right training, these people would certainly become fabulous technicians in a dealership setting, right? And so, by the way, I did have somebody in that meeting. They raised their hand, and they looked like they had like the weight of the world on their shoulders when they asked this question. They said, "Well, aren't these all the people we hear about in the news that have all kinds of issues, and they've got PTSD and all this stuff?" And wow, I mean, that one really that threw me for a loop. I was not expecting that question. I don't know why. Perhaps I should have, but it really caught me off guard. And I suddenly had that aha moment, John, and I thought, wow, these people really don't know what a veteran is.
Right. They have this, like, they watch one little microcosm of the news, and now their perception is formed by that. And it's like, well, no, this is it's the small percentage. It's this big, wide open area. Like, open your mind.
It stunned me. One of the first things, by the way, after that meeting, when I went back over to VA, one of the first things I talked to that deputy undersecretary about is I said, we've got a problem here. And I said, here's the problem. we've got great foundations like the Wounded Warrior Foundation that are out there doing everything they can to help the quote broken veteran, right? The
Right.
injured, ill, and wounded veterans. And because they're the front page news all the time, the population's got this mindset that all veterans are broken because all they hear about are people trying to help broken veterans or wounded, ill, and injured, right? So I'm like, wow, this is, it's a catch-22. You got great corporations, great nonprofits doing all those wonderful things to help the veterans who need that help. But that's such a small population, John. I would say the wounded, ill, and injured account for probably less than 5% of the total veteran population, right?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Those
But-
stats are there.
But
Yeah.
they account for 99% of what you see on TV, right?
So therefore, everybody's lumped into that perception, and it's like, oh, you're a veteran, you need special care. It's like, no,
Exactly.
you just need opportunity.
Exactly. So that changed the dynamic in that meeting conversation. And I said, okay, let's step back for a minute and let's describe here first, what is a veteran? How do you qualify to be a veteran? It isn't just that you served and now all of a sudden, somebody sprinkles holy water on you, you're a veteran, right? So I kind of explained to them that first, by statute, a veteran is anyone who's served for 180 days or more on active duty, not for training. So that means, for
Active
example,
duty. Active duty.
basic training doesn't count, right? You have to have actually served in the military. Why 180 days? Because within 180 days, you'll have become established, settled in. You're actually in a unit. You may have been deployed. As hard as it is to believe, within 180 days, yes, there are people that wind up deployed that fast. But and generally speaking, if you became injured during your first assignment, you might be going through military health care issues to resolve whatever happened to you. If let's say you were an infantry soldier, you completed basic and AIT, and you went off to the 101st or 82nd Airborne, and on your first jump, lucky you break your leg, right? So you're still on active duty. It might take 180 days before the Army decides that, okay, we've done everything we can to fix you. Unfortunately, we're going to have to let you go, right? So it's 180 days on active duty, not for training, and you're considered a veteran, right? And that includes everybody who spends 180 days or more. So if you're a retiree, for example, military retiree, you're still a veteran, even though you're a military retiree. You're still considered a veteran.
Yeah.
Right? So we kind of went all through that, and I explained to them what the GI Bill is, what the mechanisms are to support veterans who are have separated from the service, who owns the statutory responsibilities to support them in terms of education, training, healthcare, and also who's out there to help them find employment. Okay, and that, of course, being the Department of Labor. So the bottom line is once those smart people in that room at Audi realized that there was this huge talent pool, and that literally tens of thousands of service members separate every year and come right off active duty and are out there actively looking for jobs, they raised their hand and they said, hey, can you build us a program to help us provide technicians to our dealer network, to our dealership partners, all their franchises in the country. At that time, I think at that time there were like 280 some Audi dealers in the country, and they all needed techs because of the product growth. So we created the Audi Veterans to Technicians program. It was the first of its kind in the entire automotive industry. There was no other dedicated automotive technician program in the U.S. automotive industry, and it was wildly successful.
That's cool.
We've placed, I want to say, 385 techs that came into the program. We vetted them. We looked at their records of military service, their resumes. We helped them prepare. Actually, I want to say the vast majority, probably well over 80% of the resumes, we actually helped them fix before they even went to their job interview, because resume writing skills were terrible coming out of the military.
Everybody's got terrible. I mean, it's not just the military. Everybody's got a terrible skill on that.
So we helped them fix their resumes. We did background checks, all the things that you have to do to find the right people for employment, and then we narrowed that population down to that cohort of people who were, I would say, in the top 5 to 10% of the applicant gene pool, who we thought, yeah, these people are absolutely going to be successful. Audi made the commitment to train them, to send them to the Audi Academy to become a certified level 2 Audi technician, which is a mid-level tech. They even went so far as to work with Snap-on Tools and created a toolkit for the veterans, because many of them would come out of the military. Well, the service provides all the tools, right? So a lot of them, they were great technicians, great mechanics, but didn't have their own tool set, right? So
that's a big investment. That's a big investment.
It's huge.
Usually
the average technician,
curate too.
Take any kid coming out of one of the tech schools, whether it's a National Automotive Technician Education Foundation school, or UTI, or Lincoln Tech, or Wyotech, any of the big tech schools. Almost all those young kids that we're talking about, these 19-year-olds coming out of a VTAP school, they're invested $30K in tools within the first 2-3 years of being a technician,
which is incredible.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
So
Audi's program, it hit the ground running. It was wildly successful, and then, like everything else that works well, other people found out about it, discovered it, and my phone started ringing. And the next call came from Jaguar Land Rover North America. Then Mercedes-Benz. I actually met one of their vice presidents at a conference that I went to. He was a featured keynote speaker, and just in a reception, I got to meet this gentleman, and we were talking. When he knew all about, by the way, he knew all about Audi's program, and he asked me for my business card, and I gave it to him. A couple weeks went by, and I thought, well, I guess that went nowhere. And all of a sudden, the guy pops up on the radar and connected me with their people. Mercedes still has a very good technician program, one of the best in the country, really, the MB Drive program. But it's long. I think at that time it was somewhere around 16 weeks in duration.
Oh, wow.
But it was not approved for the GI Bill. So what we did is we went in there and got that program approved as the first ever national apprenticeship approved for the GI Bill for service technicians.
Really interesting. That's really, that just opens up a world of opportunity too.
Right. And so every veteran that went into that program, by the way, successfully completed. It had a near perfect graduation rate and placement rate, job placement rate, which was amazing.
And I would assume even once they're placed, they stick better than a lot of other people.
Yes, and I'll talk to the why in that here in a moment, right? So again, I keep talking about these older programs. The next one that came online, Ford and Lincoln Motor Company, right? We created their technician apprenticeship program. That was a 2-year program that led to a chassis master tech at Ford. Then Volvo, and I, at that point in time, made the decision that I had been with that company a little too long. I was there pushing 12 years, and it was time for me to make a career change. And so I had met a gentleman through one of my automotive connections. One of the senior buyers of one of the brands that I had supported was working with ERS, and they needed somebody to help ERS run an automotive project. And so they said, hey, call this guy, right? And that buyer called me, and he told me, you're going to get a phone call. He said, just hear what the guy has to say. He said, I got to keep my fingers off of this because I'm not getting involved, but they need somebody, and if you're willing to talk to them, I gave them your number, right? And that's how it went. So So I spoke to the senior vice president for sales and operations at ERS. He introduced me to the president of the company, Greg Terry, and the next thing you know, I was working with ERS initially as a consultant to help them on that project as a private consultant, and
Nice.
and then they hired me to come in as the vice president for sales and operations. And and around the same time as all this happened, a friend of mine who is at ASE, Automotive Service Excellence, the National Institute for Automotive Service Excellence, because I sit on ASE's um, Automotive Training Managers Council. He called me up and he said, "Hey," he said, you remember your customer at Audi?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well," he said, she's at Kia America, and she's trying to get a hold of you, and she's lost your contact info, and she would really appreciate it if you could give her a call." And he gave me her contact information, and she had just joined Kia America, and it's kind of ironic. Kia is today almost exactly where Audi was 10, 12 years ago, going through this period of extraordinary record growth.
Record growth. I mean,
yes.
The dealer network is expanding. They're manufacturing here. I mean, they're doing everything.
Yes, and their product is absolutely, it's amazing. It's stunning. When I first heard the word Kia, I thought, really, Kia? And I'm thinking about the little red oval logo Kia and the chipmunks riding in the car, and I'm
One
like,
of the best ads, one of the most iconic ads, like with the chipmunks grooving out. Like, it was awesome.
Yeah.
I love that ad.
But initially I was thinking, do I really want to get involved with them, right? Because all the brands that I had worked with for the most part were luxury and performance brands, with the exception of Ford. And Ford is builds number one best trucks in the world, right?
Yeah.
So I was more than happy to deal with Ford, but I was kind of like, well, okay, let me find out more about Kia, right? So when I got involved with them, I looked at this and I thought, wow, if there was ever a company that was positioned to really need and benefit from veteran technicians, this is the company, right?
This is what I love, right? Here's this international company coming into the United States. It needs skilled workforce. And what better of a skilled workforce is our veterans? I mean, it's amazing.
Yes, it truly is. And so the paradigm plays out, and I'm sure you've had this experience yourself, John. Each time you start something new, you kind of look back at what did you do in the past, and if you were given the opportunity to do it better, what would you change? How would you make what you did in the past better? And so,
every single day, let's rewrite it. Let's make it better.
Right. So Kia VTAP, it represents the evolution of 6 or 7 major automotive technician programs that involve the military, and this thing is the cat's meow. I mean, it takes everything we ever learned to a level that nobody else has achieved. So here's for example. If you go through Kia's Veteran Technician Apprenticeship Program as a tech, within 4 months of having joined the program, you'll have completed master level Kia service technician training through Kia University.
That's fast.
So the first 3 months that you spend in the dealership, and at the dealership, they're getting some brand immersion, product immersion training, maintenance and light repair tasks, working on the lube rack under the mentorship and coaching of a master level technician at the dealership. So first 3 months is, it's kind of like welcome to the business, right? And and then in the 4th month, ideally in the 4th month, we send them to either the Lombard, Illinois, which is Chicago, or the Kennesaw, Georgia, right outside of Atlanta, service training center for a full month. They are a captive audience for an entire month. and they go through every piece of training that's available to a Kia service technician. We start them out in the first week. We make the assumption that they know nothing about electrical theory.
Love it.
Okay, and so we take them through the principles of electrical theory, Ohm's law, all that. We grind them through, whether they know it, ride a bicycle backwards with their eyes blindfolded or not. And in fact, the students that really know it already, we pair them up with students that are a little bit weak, right? So you got a strong guy with a weak guy, pulls the weak guy up, and it gives a stronger guy some opportunity to do a little bit of leadership, coaching, and mentoring themselves. So by the time they come out of the back side of that 4 weeks, they're super smart. They're schoolhouse smart. They're not experience smart in the brand, but they are certainly schoolhouse smart. So when you pair that up with their military experience, having been turning wrenches as a technician in the military, now you've got them Kia trained. You get them back to the dealership. These guys become some of the best techs in the shop, and so I'd say the toughest part of the program for us is really helping to educate the service managers in the dealerships about what they're going to get by making the commitment to bring one of these techs in, because there is a financial commitment on their part. There are some costs to being in the program. There's certainly a cost to sending their tech for a whole month to the schoolhouse, right?
Yeah.
So that bill right there could be a $10,000 bill, depending on what part of the country you're in, because you got to pay for transportation, lodging, meals, all that.
Yeah. Food. Yeah.
But what's interesting is when you talk to the general managers at those dealerships, the dealer principals who are the owners, they don't even blink an eye. They're like, sign me up, and can you get me, you ready for this? Can you get me 5? I need 5 techs right now. How fast can you get them for me? They don't care about the money.
It's too short. 4 months. I need to make that in a week. Yeah.
Right. So what they're starting to realize is, the service managers, by the way, are always resistant to spending money because they're running on a monthly cycle, business cycle. So you being a money guy, when you're running a P&L, right, you got to show a profit at the end of every month.
And that service side of the business is, it is the profit center of every
exactly.
It is just an amazing structure.
So you get the service managers, though, some of these guys are reluctant to spend money to hire a tech through a program like this up front, because all they're thinking about is what we call the close knife fight, which is that 30-day business cycle, right? Oh man, I'm going to take a $5,000 hit or whatever it's going to be on my parts, my parts account. But the dealer principals and the general managers are smart enough to say, look, for every week you are short a tech, you're losing way more than $5,000. You could be in the hole $8,000 or $10,000, because all those billable customer rate hours that you're not turning wrenches on because you're short a tech, you're losing money. You're bleeding, right?
And then the reliability of that tech person showing up every day on time, doing the work, repeat. That's the value out of this thing. Now, question for you. If I'm in alignment to take advantage of this VTAP program, how do I find you?
Well, so if you're a Kia retailer, right, you already know about us, because it's a national apprenticeship sponsored by Kia America. So all of their region and district parts and sales managers know about the program and encourage the retailers to actually use the program. So the Kia dealers, initially when the program started, we did a series of webinars, and we went to the National Retailer Conference in Las Vegas, and we had a big booth out there, and they came through and learned all about the program. So if you're inside the dealer network, you pretty much already know about this program.
Right.
Where we still have to, pretty much, every week or every month, we're still re-educating people on it because turnover is an issue even amongst service managers across the industry. So it doesn't matter what brand you work for. Service managers are constantly rolling. They're constantly turning over. So you get a new service manager in, you got to get their head in the game and help them understand what this program can do for them. But generally speaking, most of the dealers know about the program. Over half of them are using the program every day.
Great.
And so like all things that are new, well, this program started in 23. I think the first year we placed maybe 90 some techs. This year we're on a pace to hit 200.
Wow.
Last year we hit 156, if I recall, and that's because as the knowledge level builds amongst the management teams at the dealership level, and as the corporate region and district parts and service managers, as their confidence level comes up, they start pushing the program with their dealers who are short techs, because they tell them, look, you can't afford to be without a technician. This is a great program, go use it, right? Where the program sells itself now, 2 years downstream, is the turnover rate. So if you look at the national statistics for automotive service technician turnover, whether you take that stat from NADA, the National Auto Dealer Association, they track technician turnover. All the big suppliers that help the industry with software and things like dealer management systems and research. So you talk to Reynolds or Carlisle, any these big companies that are involved with dealer management and dealer statistics and industry stats, they'll all generally point to the same range of turnover, which is about, believe it or not, staggering, around 45% of the technician workforce turns over every year across the whole industry. Doesn't matter what brand, what flavor you're talking about. That's high turnover. So this program, we track turnover daily in this program, and it averages 12%.
That is incredible, because
Yep.
as a business owner, everybody knows the key is the consistency of the people that you have on your team.
Yes.
Placing and training is the hardest thing and the most expensive thing in a business. And if you have a 45% turnover rate, that becomes very expensive.
It is. It's, I always say that people are the toughest commodity that any corporation ever has to deal with, right? Your workforce. Your workforce is everything. And if you're grinding through people, that comes at a staggering cost. Because just as fast as you can train somebody, as my wife, it's like my wife talking about money, right? She always says, what good is it if it all comes in the front door and rolls right out the back door, right?
That's right.
It's no different with people, right?
So with ERS Elite, you can do this with any type of company. Like if I'm a company and I'm listening to this, I can engage the services of ERS Elite to create an apprentice program or something similar, that talent type thing, to help them acquire the people that they need.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
It's not just automotive; it could be any anything.
So we've taken some, I'll say, natural, intuitive next steps. We're sticking our big toe in the water in other venues. This year we started to venture into the medium and heavy truck industry. It just makes sense because
Total natural dovetail. Yeah,
it's the next place that technicians would logically fit. Although I would tell you, heavy truck technicians, and even to that extent, medium truck technicians are different. It's a somewhat different skill set than an automotive service technician, as is the work environment. It's a little bit different, right? But it's an easy bridge. and we're also now engaging in the recreational and commercial marine industry. So we're talking with manufacturers. We're engaged with dealer groups. This past year we went to IBEX, which is associated with the National Marine Manufacturers Industry, trying to understand what their needs are. Their needs are similar, but they have other challenges. Their dealerships are generally much smaller than an automobile business. Their turnover and their talent needs are very different, and it's very seasonal. Depending on what part of the country, and it's extremely seasonal, right?
Yeah. So, Bernie, this is incredible. If somebody wants to learn more about it, how do they reach you?
Well, they can reach us. They can reach me, one of two ways. They can either go to our corporate ERS website and just go to erseducationalresource.com, or they can come to my division's website, which is erselite.com, and they can reach us directly that way, or they can reach out to John Smallwood
and we'll direct you.
I saw that crazy retired Army colonel on your show, and I want to learn more about is there a role for us?
And we're gonna put the resources into the podcast when we do it. So like if you happen to be a veteran and you want to get involved in the program, you'll give us the link to put there. Okay.
Yes.
So like we'll have all that stuff for you. I'd love to kind of follow up with you in a couple of months and do this again to kind of get an update and maybe do, just a quick follow on. I
Sure.
truly appreciate having you on for today. I mean, this was a really good lesson in a learning process, and I want to thank you.
I almost jumped out of my hide this morning, John, because I suddenly realized, I'm supposed to be doing this thing with you this morning. I got back late yesterday from South Florida. We were involved over the last 3 days in doing some filming for All Access with Andy Garcia about
cool.
About our program. So we had Kia with us. In fact, we went to a Kia dealership, beautiful new facility in Lighthouse Point, South Florida, and we filmed on location there. We were at Land Rover in West Palm Beach. They've hired, half of their technicians over the years they hired through us. Then we were at the Viking Yacht Service Center up in Riviera Beach. We did some filming up there as well. A good friend of mine from George Robinson from South Jersey Yacht Sales, he's a Viking dealer, an Albemarle dealer. He came down. George and I, we met at the Atlantic City Boat Show about 5 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And we just struck up a friendship. And he is a very philanthropic guy. He does things with St. Jude's, and he's just a great citizen. He wants to help people, and he's very passionate about doing his part. And when he discovered what I was involved with, he's like, hey, he said, let's figure out a way to work together. And he said I can facilitate connections for you to get into the marine business, and and he's not asking for a penny. He's doing all 100% out of the goodness of his heart.
I've met him too. He's an amazing person.
Yep. George jumped on the plane Monday morning, or Sunday rather, and flew down to his place in Palm Beach, and he was there bright and early Monday. Awesome. That's great. So George.
I met him at a boat show. I don't know him, after that, but it was right when he was taking over South Jersey Marina. I mean, a South Jersey yacht sales. So
he'd be a great guy for you to do a show with.
You know what? Let's connect.
He's got a fantastic personal life story too. This is his, like, it's his second career, but he did this because he loves boats. He always wanted to be involved with boats, right?
Yeah, that was the conversation that we had, and it was a really awesome conversation. And then I haven't seen him so I have to get together with him. This has really been great, Bernie. Thank you for everything, and I will see you soon.
That's great, John. Thanks again. I really appreciate the opportunity to do this with you, and um, I can sense you're a great American patriot too. You want to help. You want to help the cause.
I want to help the cause. I think this country is the greatest country in the world, and I think we have the greatest people and the greatest talent, and we just keep adding and making this country better.
Absolutely. Thanks again, John.
Thank you, my friend. Talk to you
Have
soon.
a great day.
You too.